All right, we are here with Caitlin Long, a 20-year Wall Street veteran who discovered Bitcoin very early on and brings an intersection of the legacy financial world and crypto together. She is most well known for her advocacy of her home state in Wyoming and bringing businesses, developers, all sorts of players to have innovation in that state. She has a very interesting initiative going on at this current moment that we're going to talk with her right now. So Caitlin, thanks for joining us. And how are you doing today?
Hey, it's my pleasure. I'm doing great. We're getting ready for the Wyoming blockchain stampede. So you're catching us at a really good time.
Awesome. Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about what exactly this event is?
It is actually a series of events. We did the first annual WyoHackathon last year to celebrate Wyoming passing the first 5 bills during the 2018 legislative session. And as you know, we passed 8 more during the 2019 legislative session, many of which are actually even more substantial to help the blockchain industry. And so this year what we did was broaden out WyoHackathon to include the hackathon itself, but also a developer conference, a business conference, the Wyoming Blockchain Task Force legislative group, of which I'm a member, and also the Sandcastle Invitational. They were going to do the Sandcastle Invitational, which is a competition for developers in Phoenix, but chose because of Wyoming's work to bring it to Wyoming instead. And so we added that on. So the Stampede is actually a whole series of events. The capstone, of course, though, is WyoHackathon.
Great, great. And what I found interesting was that looking across your programming and as well as your different speakers, you're really bringing a agnostic group of coin communities, of individuals together. So can you comment on why you thought it was good to have a mixed, diverse offering there opposed to any one particular coin?
Well, this is interesting because Wyoming is by definition agnostic to the technology. That's the way the law has to be, or should always be. I guess some would argue that regulators like the SEC are captured by the traditional industry, but at least the thought process we had collectively as the folks working on this was that it should be agnostic. Let's not let the law pick the winners. And also the University of Wyoming is the sponsor of WyoHackathon. We're doing it on campus. That is a public university, so it's a public event. And so again, this was not about picking winners. To the extent that there are folks that want to work on interoperability, there have actually been some bounties. I think we're above 150,000 in bounties, which for a hackathon is huge. And especially for a small hackathon like Wyoming, that's that amount, in part because thanks to the University of Wyoming, we don't have to pay for the event, rent expenses and the like. But really, when you think about it for developers, I mean, it's worth it, right? On the for-profit events, the producers are making money, they're paying the rent expenses and the food expenses and the like. Here on a not-for-profit event, none of us are making money, we're all volunteers. And the University of Wyoming is donating a lot of the services to the event, which means that we can make it a truly developer-centric event. And there's some serious prizes that are available. And one of which is, back to your question, the interoperability prize. I think to your point, we've had luminaries from different communities. Last year, Joe Lubin came from the Ethereum community, and Consensus was extremely interested in making it not just an Ethereum event, to their credit. And this year we've got Charles Hoskinson and the Cardano community coming. And we've also got Trace Mayer, but we've also got one of the Bitcoin Cash developers coming. Like, we really truly have a confluence of people from different communities. And I can't wait to see what comes out of it. Maybe everybody stays in their own camps. But personally, I hope not, because I think we all win if we can make these platforms interoperable. I think very few people believe that only one of them is appropriate for everything that we're trying to use these new database technologies for. And there are certain use cases for which some are better, and there are certain use cases for which others are better. And to the extent that the developers are working together and cordially in the same communities with each other, even if just at an event like this, that's a real win.
Great, great. And you mentioned how really this year there's an expansion from not just the technical and the development, but also the business aspect. So you have different programming when it comes to the hackathon, but also the Stampede Business Conference. Can you speak a little bit more about what you're bringing to the table when it comes to businesses?
Well, the Wyoming laws are really important, and I'm loving the fact that we have some of the top lawyers in blockchain law coming to this event and speaking. And it's not only to encourage them to dig in even more, but it's also for the non-Wyoming practicing attorneys to explain to everybody else why these Wyoming laws are so meaningful. So I think the regulatory piece is going to be a big part of what comes out of the business conference. And we have a lot to say, but it's also very clear that a lot of folks don't understand the magnitude of what Wyoming did for this industry. We're the only state that actually has given legal clarity to what the assets are. And you know, some developers certainly think code is law, and the law should never actually enter into defining any of these things. And I respect that view. But I also think the reality is that that's holding back the industry, because businesses want legal opinions that what they're doing is legal. And especially to the extent we're bringing institutional money in, like, you know, big mutual funds and ETFs, right? Nobody who's a fiduciary is going to touch something that is in a legal gray area because there's too much legal risk. So I thought it was important that we stand up and define what the rights and obligations of parties in these transactions are from a legal perspective, so that if there is a dispute, a judge knows exactly how to handle it. And also, perhaps more importantly for the development of the industry, if these assets are going to be used in financial services such as collateral for a loan, right? The coin lending market, as we know, has just taken off in 18 months. Then how do you know legally what the rights and obligations in a loan of a crypto asset are? And the only state that has defined that is Wyoming.
Interesting, interesting. And how will this conference and the after effects of it ripple into your grander picture of making Wyoming that blockchain state?
Well, I think Wyoming's already doing that. It's not me. We built it and they're coming. What you're going to start to see is the biggest news is there are about 5 large organizations that have indicated to me that they intend to apply for special purpose depository institution level first. That's the SPDI, affectionately and very ironically nicknamed the Speedy Bank. The Speedy Bank is designed to allow it to basically be an on and off ramp between the fiat traditional financial industry and the crypto financial industry. And it's going to solve a lot of the problems where traditional banks just won't bank startups in this industry, because that's what these companies are going to specialize in. But it's also going to enable custody of crypto assets. So I think you're going to see some exchanges come into Wyoming, and you're going to start to see SEC level compliance on custody of crypto securities. And so I'll let the results speak for themselves, but for your listeners, I will hint, there's a sizable chunk of assets that's lining up to redomicile themselves into Wyoming. The applications open October 1st. It's going to take at least 9 months for them to open their doors. So, you know, this doesn't solve the industry's problems in the short term, but once we get going with these, I think you're going to see Wyoming's going to be the Mecca for financial services in this niche part of the industry.
Fantastic, fantastic. And where do you see as a differentiator for Wyoming, being that we are seeing different jurisdictions start to compete, especially internationally? Like we have Malta, we have Hong Kong, we have other places. You know, why should people really think about Wyoming as different than those?
Yeah, it's great. And you know, in certain areas, you know, they're competing on lack of regulation, which is great for certain projects that don't need any regulation. I think I'd like to borrow a phrase from Andreas Antonopoulos, once you start to actually have a third party that is trusted to custody assets, which I know a lot of us are allergic to, but I'll come back to in a moment and explain why. But once you actually have that, that's when the regulation actually probably does need to take place. Now, why is it that anybody would ever custody their crypto assets with a third party? The answer is that it's some part of the institutional investment community, a big part of it, has to by law. And they're not allowed to self-custody. And even if they were, they're not set up to do it. They would rather pay somebody to, to be a multi-sig signatory on an asset, or, just for key management purposes. They don't trust themselves. They'd rather pay somebody else. And right now, unfortunately, most of the laws in the developed world require that investment managers hold the assets at a third party, just because there were historically so many shenanigans when investment managers didn't hold those assets at a third party. I think we all know eventually a blockchain can be considered a custodian, because if it's a true public blockchain and it's immutable, why do you need a third party? But right now, I think we're in this bridge phase where we need these on and off ramps between the traditional and crypto financial services industries. And we also need to figure out a way to let these big institutional investors like mutual funds and pension funds, who aren't set up to self-custody and don't want to at this point, we need to have them have an ability to participate in this industry. I think probably 20, 30 years down the road, these custodians may not even be there. But look also at at how the exchange market has worked. We actually have in the crypto exchanges a few pretty significant players that are non-custodial, but most of the big players, as you know, actually take custody of their customers' crypto assets. And most traders actually leave those crypto assets there. They shouldn't, but we all do. While we're trading, we leave our assets on the exchange, and so that gets back to what Andreas said, and I think he's right. That if you're going to have a third party that's taking custody of customers' assets, they darn well better not steal them. They darn well better have pretty high security standards around them. Those are some very basic approaches that I think everybody should be adhering to. And unfortunately, as we know, with some of the exchanges that have gone down or been hacked, not everybody has adhered to them.
Great insight there. And as we conclude, I want to make sure that everybody knows exactly where to follow all the latest updates coming out of your event that's happening in the next few days. So can you plug all of the relevant links and destinations folks can go to?
Yeah, sure. The biggest one is WyoHackathon.io. One word, WyoHackathon.io. We've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got LinkedIn, we've got the website itself. We will be live streaming a lot of the events. And again, we've got an amazing lineup of speakers. The keynote, of course, is Jesse Powell. We have to give a special shout out to Kraken. They've been so good to Wyoming. And for you developers, I think you're going to see some interesting announcements come out from Charles Hoskinson's presentations as well. They're going to break some news at WyoHackathon. So the Cardano community, you're all going to want to either show up or watch the live stream.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you heard it there, guys. Make sure to check that out. CoinSpice will also be doing their part to have some coverage, make sure the latest and greatest and all the juicy details are coming out of that event we'll be covering. So once again, thank you, Caitlin, for joining us, and everybody stay spicy.